tonight's session is one of the panel debates that we wanted to tackle as a group in a group session to talk about the difficulties we're facing concerning the news in the media and the lack of information coming through these through the channels of communication. It was named Fake News, Demonizing the Others. So here we have 4 panelists. And before we start, we have to give a brief disclaimer. We mentioned already in the previous session that this session will be taped. Of course, we did mention that our workshop is based on the Chatham House rules. So this tape and the material that is the audio material that we will have is only for internal use unless you as participants and you as panelists agree that the information in the panel debate could be shared with the public, meaning through our channels of communication. So please be without a worry that none of the materials will actually come out without your agreement. And just as a side note, as a side joke, if the term Macedonia comes out by any of the panelists or participants in the comments, we might as well bleep it. So as a sort of tool to use in distributing this material to the wider public. So or a sound like that. So clinging of the glasses or whatnot. Yes. Again, the panel tonight is called Fake News, Demonizing the Others, and our panelists, for panelists we have 4 journalists, 2 from Macedonia, 2 from Greece. On my right side we have Angelos Athanasopoulos. So yeah, it's going to take me a while, so maybe Angelos, Angelos.
Sure, I think it's the best.
Yes, from Tovima Weekly and Tania Daily. And we also have our guest Vasilis Nedos from Katimerini Daily. Also from the Macedonian side we have Biljana Spasiska-Georgievska, journalist from Pt.1, a news editor. And we might add a former BBC correspondent or working at the desk office in London. And we have our 4th panelist, Vasko Popetreski, journalist and TV host of the political TV show 360 Degrees, and many times used by us as a moderator. So now he's on the other side. So we're going to ask him a lot of these difficult questions. Before we start, we were supposed to have an input by Kristina Ozimets, a journalist from Macedonia and the president of PINA, which is an investigative platform in Macedonia, but she felt a bit ill. So I will take over partially the role of giving her input, and is actually related to our panel. So the topic of fake news. Right now, we're going to distribute to all of you and to our panelists. Thank you. Pictures that were used in Macedonia. There you go. These pictures had been used predominantly in Greece in the period from January till April of 2018. And you might ask, why is this important? You can notice that this is the propaganda from the 1940s, late 1940s, but we're going to have our panelist, Vasilis, give us a bit more information regarding this, these 2 pictures. Here they were portrayed as something that the extreme right had done for their propaganda in mobilizing the Greek public to come to their protests. So Vasilis, could you actually give us?
Well, what this is, even though it seems like a propaganda poster, summoning people to participate in the demonstration, it's quite the contrary. It's ironic, and it tends to mock the organizers of these demonstrations for somehow making this protest seem like an anti-communist demonstration, like the ones, and the pictures are actually from the period of late 40s, and I believe that it's also from the early 50s, after the Civil War, and some movies that were shot at the time to, let's say, boost the anti-communist agenda of the post-Civil War Greek governments. So that's the general description. I wouldn't say that this is so much fake news, but I would say it's trolling. It's very typical trolling in print. Not necessarily very aesthetically sound, but it gives you the idea of what this is all about. This is about extreme right trying to take over the center right in Greece through an issue such as the name dispute. That's my general comment on that. I don't know if anyone else wants to say something on it.
Sure. What were the reactions in your country?
For these, not so many. Not so many.
How were they perceived?
It was mostly on social media. It was mostly on social media. Mainstream media didn't play it at all. So mostly it was social media. And I guess that someone has to tell us what happened in Skopje with these.
Sure, that's what we're going to have Vasco and Biljana.
Vasco, if you remember what happened with after this. Yes, they were also mostly on social media. Here.
You have?
Vasco has one.
Okay. So to be honest, Milan, I was not aware that we're going to use this concrete example, but because I saw the topic for the discussion today, I tried to prepare myself, and I found the same example, of course, because it is very illustrative of what we would like to discuss today. And it is interesting that, fortunately, there is one guy in Macedonia. His name is Žarko Trajanovski, who is very much dedicated and committed to, go into details and to explain the things from their roots. So luckily, Žarko Trajanovski, 2-3 days after those pictures were published in Macedonian media, have made a research, a very deep research, coming to roots of what is really behind the stories. And he published this research with a very clear explanation that the original photo is a poster for one film from 1958, that it was also used in similar contexts in previous years by the same group of people in Greece. That, for example, Samaras was one of the targets of the same group with the same illustration. And that, again, as my colleague Vasilis said, the intention was completely opposite of what was the mainstream, explanation or story here in our media. And the story of Žarko Trajanovski, which clarified. I mean, what is behind the whole thing was done within the framework of existing fact-checking service in Macedonia. We have one of the leading persons here of that fact-checking service here in the first line. And we were lucky that we could find the truth. So the problem was that even the truth was found, all media that have published this as something that is strange or, I mean, very dangerous, etc., afterwards haven't published the truth. And that is one of the problematic aspects of the whole story. I know that some people who are here in this room have friends here in Skopje who have also published this story, and that they have alarmed them that it's not true, that it's ironic and satire, but unfortunately they haven't believed in and also haven't followed up with the truth.
Yeah, this is interesting because I believe it was last Friday that I found out that this was satire and irony created by some of the progressives in Greece, and it is really a testament to the lack of information sharing that we have. It is done on a personal basis. It is done through some of the contacts that some or many of the Macedonians have in Greece. We're going to follow this up with a brief story that actually came out as news. I believe it was like Tovima or Tandea a few days ago, talking about the Nikola Dimitrov and Zoran Zaev split. Or one of those. So I wasn't sure of the name of it. Again, this is another fake news, but yes, this was a story that was also reported in Macedonia, and you know, we wanted to hear the perspective, the point of view of some of the Greek journalists, and then we're going to transfer it over to Brianna. But Angelos, how do you see that in terms of the news that came out, let's say in Greece? This was taken over by the Macedonian media, and about this so-called rift between the Macedonian Prime Minister and the Minister for Foreign Affairs in Macedonia.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, you know that in diplomacy, diplomats are very prone to blame game. So I think, actually this is interesting, this Zaev versus Dimitrov case, because I don't know if you know, but it all started after a statement by the MFA here, where actually the idea was that we prefer quality instead of speed in a solution, towards a solution. Mm-hmm. So then suddenly our cell phones started to beep in Athens, and I believe that Vasilis is maybe started beeping too, because mine did, with an unofficial leak saying that we won't let people to play with the solutions that we are striving to. And then we started to search what does this mean, and it was after our questions that from the Greek government we received the answer that there is a gap in opinions between Zaev, who is more pro-solution, and Dimitrov, who is actually pro-VMRO, and he has ambitions, political ambitions, and he's the bad cap instead of the good cap. And actually, to me, that was a bit funny, because it reminded me the first 6 months of the Syriza government in Athens, when we had this Tsipras-Varoufakis duo, And then many people were saying that Tsipras is the good guy and Varoufakis is the bad guy. So this is how we're going to blackmail the Europeans. This is what it reminded me. I don't know if it's necessarily fake news. I know that it initiated the photos you are giving around now. But what it shows is that, what it proves to me, is that it is very easy for us journalists to be convinced by something, or maybe led us to use something that we are not aware of the details. And the truth is that many Greek journalists, and I include myself in this, I wouldn't say that we are totally well informed on how the domestic balance of power is now in Skopje. And then it depends on how many questions you put to yourself as a journalist. I mean, the cover that Yannis circulated from Εφημερίδα των Συντακτών shows that some people are very easy to swallow this. Some others have second views about it. I mean, my information from Skopje is don't believe this kind of stuff. This gap does not exist. Okay, so the best thing you can do in this case is you have to report both. If you cannot be sure which is right and which is wrong, you have to report both. So, if you follow what happened in Sunday newspapers, you will see that at least in the so-called more serious media, I'm not using this to downgrade any media in Greece, but the more serious media kept a distance from this. I mean, it's not very easy to totally discredit or ignore what the government is pushing through. But at the same time, you saw that in many of the serious media, you had also the opposite view. And of course, this led to this, which is what happened yesterday, which looks very good. Two friendly pals here, and they really know how to bike these big things.
At least I have those.
Yes, of course. And but this can very easily be described as fake news. Okay, because or good PR, but the distinction is very blurred. So this shows that if one is fake news, then this is fake news, and fake news feed each other. And it's actually very difficult to define what is fake news. I mean, if you search around to find a definite definition of fake news, you won't find any. I found one somewhere saying, let me find it here because, so, the publication of news items which is misleading readers, watchers, or followers. This is a simple definition, but you can never be sure that this is the right one. Okay, so.
Thank you, Angelos. Now, Biljana, you have the pictures. You have the pictures of Prime Minister Zaev and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nikola Dimitrov, and this came out just yesterday, I believe it was last night or this morning, showing two of the members of the Macedonian government friendly, hanging around,
their wives
biking, their wives actually
together.
meeting together. So how do you describe this? Vasco, if we can have the microphone for Biljana, just please. So Angelos already said that this could also be described as fake news. How do you see it as a journalist?
As a journalist, my first impression was that this is a good PR. I'm not sure really what are the relations at the moment between Dimitrov and Zaev. I don't believe that they are that far between each other regarding the negotiations, but definitely they have to prove that they are in good relations, not just two of them, but their wives, probably their children, I'm not sure. But definitely it says a lot about playing ping pong with news items coming from each country to another. We don't have detailed information what's going on related to the negotiating process. We don't have details about specific lines or whatever, how everything will end up. But because the journalists usually want to keep the subject live, they are trying to improvise, very often to speculate, very often to write on the basis of something which was heard from official sources, but sometimes unofficial sources as well, from political parties, and that's the game we are playing from both sides. I'm not proud to talk about fake news as a citizen of the country which became famous worldwide as a factory of fake news. 2 years ago, after the elections in America, presidential elections, what happened in Veles, what happened with young people producing the fake news from Macedonia is still unknown to the end. We don't have a clear picture what happened, who stands behind them, how they get the idea to write related to the elections. So if I say that another third party stands behind them, it could be fake news as well. Not sure. I would like to start with, I would like to tell a personal story. 2 years ago, I visited Athens during the Easter holidays. We've been watching, we've been two couples there, and we've been watching about the ceremony in front of the Greek parliament, which was state and religious together. Then we've been watching the church ceremony in Glyfada, nearby Athens, and then there was another traditional ceremony which happened in a small village south of Athens, which is called Vari, correct me if I'm wrong. When I wanted to check the news, the titles, only the titles, what's going on in my country, to see what are the main titles, the title was from Athens, from the correspondent of Macedonian media, Macedonian news agency, as far as I remember, from Athens, that there is no lamp anymore in Greece for the Easter lunch. As a result of the crisis, people became poor, they cannot buy, that the bags of the people coming out of the supermarkets are emptier and emptier, that the crisis is so deep that the people in Greece practically doesn't have chance to follow their tradition to have lamb on their Easter lunch, which wasn't true according to what I've seen first in the village of Vari. There was a massacre of lambs in that small village. Hundreds and hundreds were roasting in almost every moment. The village was full of people, full of car. I don't know how what is it tradition to go exactly in that village, or there are many places like that.
It's one of the traditional places for Easter lunch.
Okay. But definitely there were lambs there.
Terrible sight for the vegetarians.
Yes. So this wasn't the only. This is not the only example. We can recall a lot of practically, probably not fake news, but demonizing news. During the crisis, there were much more news items here coming from Athens that the crisis is deepening, that the life of people is difficult and more difficult, that Greece is not coming out of the crisis, that there are still huge problems, salaries are lower, pensions are lower, but no news about the getting out of the crisis, no news about the taxation rules or better situation in taxation system, not news about the banking system getting better and more stable, not news about stabilization in Greece regarding the crisis. That's happening still. I would say that it is a rule in journalism that only black news is a news item, but still it is only one side, not the real picture. We are at the same situation even now. I'm not sure what are the main news, vice versa, from Macedonia to Greece. Probably the same, I would say. And we are circulating, sometimes we are quoting even our own words through Greek media, which is not, which is not contributing to better informed public. It's not contributing at all in making better atmosphere during the negotiations on the name dispute. It's not creating critical public to react on the negotiating process. So until we start to know each other much more better in media, the situation will be the same. I don't expect any changes. This meeting today is one of the links that was missing, I would say, in the past, and it's still missing until we have more interviews, more stories, more live, reportings, more stories about the normal life, the real life, not only about the negotiations. That won't change. This is a historical, I would say, not only open window for resolving the big issue, but resolving all these small issues which are going parallel of this process. Definitely better connections and better relations and more frequent contacts between journalists, media, or exchange, or whatever. I really don't know. There are much more. Probably we'll talk tomorrow more on resolving these issues. Will help this process.
Thank you, Biljana. And you mentioned the Veles factory of fake news and the effect and the impact it had on the elections, probably on the biggest economy in the world, so the United States. And of course, it hasn't been proven that is actually what swayed the vote. But it also impacted and had some consequences in their society. Of course, that is not a good news, good news for our country. But now the question is posed: what are possibly the short and the long-term consequences of these fake news platforms and the information that's given, possibly on the political institutions and the state institutions, and the dialogue between, let's say, our two countries and possibly the Western Balkan as a region. Vasco, could you elaborate a bit more, and then we'll take the points of view of all of you coming this way.
May I first add something on the story about Zaev and Dimitrov differences? I agree with my colleague Athanasopoulos.
Angelos.
Anastasopoulos.
Angelos. No. You won't change my name.
Let's keep it to Angelos. Angelos.
No fake names.
You heard it here first. No fake names.
Only a qualifier. It was a blame game, definitely, because unfortunately we have never heard that it was Monday, if I'm not wrong, when both ministers met in Brussels after a New York round of negotiations, and announced that there is an agreement and understanding on the framework of a solution. And I'm sure that from both sides and both ministers confirmed the same day that a group of experts from the Macedonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs are in Athens, and that in parallel with the political negotiations on the minister level, they work on a draft written agreement. What we have never heard and will never heard, because tomorrow we'll have great news. They will announce a deal, that there is an agreement between both countries. So these obstacles will not be news anymore. That on Tuesday, very next day, a problem occurred during the negotiations. I mean, during the drafting of
Wednesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Witches.
And it was linked with the usage of the adjective, and it's not something that is not known in certain circles. And unfortunately, I mean, Kodzias called Dimitrov, he shouted on the phone, etc. He said, "You want to
Torpedo the agreement.
sorry?
To torpedo the
To
agreement.
torpedo the agreement, etc. But what was the consequence of the whole story? The work of the working groups have been broken. So our team took the very next flight to Skopje, and negotiations were finished in Athens. And then this game started. Our side intended to organize a new round of meeting and negotiations, because the explanation was that we cannot work talking by phone, we cannot work on exact paper by phones, etc. But the Greek side insisted on the text that was proposed by the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that this is the basis for negotiations, etc. And in the meantime, many things happened. Nimitz again tried to facilitate the process. He produced some paper. Kodzias again shouted to Nimitz, etc. So it was very interesting that many things happened behind the scene, but nothing was reported in the media and will not be reported. Why? The question is why. My estimation is that the Greek side is very well aware that we are, and this government is really willing and playing on one card. It is a solution of the main issue, and a quick invitation for NATO and possible opening of the accession talks. And therefore, I think that the Greek government is aware that it can really put a pressure towards our side, which is already in the corner, you know, and to get more in the agreement. But as I said, it was part of blame game. I would agree that what we witnessed yesterday with these photos from Strumica was again an effort to mislead the public opinion in both countries. I would not say that Zaev and Dimitrov don't have regular and normal contacts, but it is also obvious that there was something behind this story, that something happened with the relations between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And what was now the question?
The question is the short and long-term consequences of the fake news and the fake news platforms for the political systems, the democratic institutions, and the dialogue between the two countries and beyond, Western Balkan included as well. So, what is your position on that?
Google Translate helps us really a lot, but it cannot you know, there is a gap, and we have a language problem. That is the main problem, you know. And unfortunately, very few people, and in particular, very few people in media in Macedonia speak Greek language, and vice versa. I think in Greece, I don't know whether there are people who speaks
In the media, yeah.
in the media. Not Macedonian, but maybe Bulgarian or Serbian, so they can easily follow our media. And from my point of view, this is the main problem in the communication between two societies. So if I'm able to follow on a daily basis, regularly, my credible colleagues in Athens, I will not make mistakes as I maybe sometimes do. And I think it also values for the other side as well. But I don't know how, whether it is possible maybe best to organize one quick course on Greek and Macedonian language.
Let's not put all the hope on Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung's shoulders. So, but Vasilis, can we have your take on are the democratic institutions under attack by these fake news platforms? Is there a chance of winning this battle with the fake news platforms between the two countries?
First of all, I wanted to say to Biljana that if we have good news on taxation, I will call you first. But I very much doubt it.
Better.
Yeah, I really doubt it. And as for the only word of your language as no, I don't know why that has started on mine. It's tajno. Not a good word.
Sad.
Sad,
There are
yes.
many people paying taxes now,
Yes.
in comparison with 10 years ago, during the crisis.
Well, let's
Probably a little bit
let's
less.
not do that discussion because it brings tears to my eyes. But in terms of fake news, I wouldn't say it's a regional problem. I had the opportunity to be in the United States some 7 months ago, for a month almost. It was on a program about fake news and disinformation. I made academia, news people, newspapers, influencers, as we call them. And I realized that pretty much they have the same problem as we do have here in the region, because fake news are directed directly to our bias on a lot of things. It's what they call cognitive bias. So if you're a Greek wanting to believe that your government betrays you by compromising with its northern neighbor, you will find a way to let's say, confirm that bias of yours. And if you have the complete opposite opinion, you will do the same. So there is little room for balance the political discourse on both countries, and this is a main problem from the parties. This is a political problem. And in Greece, as Angelos knows, especially in the last 3.5 years, the polarization between the governing party and the opposition is huge, and it's also depicted, is also reflected on the name issue. If it was a different period of time and we had that discourse with these qualities, these certain characteristics, it wouldn't be like that in any other period. One other thing about fake news, it's the financial aspect. Biljana mentioned the global capital of fake news, Veles. It's a very well-known example. And it has a financial incentive behind that. People are making money out of it. So this is an aspect that we cannot ignore. And then afterwards is the clear-cut propaganda that I don't need to elaborate. But also, and this is something that all my colleagues here, especially Angelos, can understand, is the crisis of transition in journalism. Most media, even as we probably mistakenly so characterize as serious media, even the ones that have newsrooms, expert reporters for certain issues, are feeling the pressure of economic crisis. So fewer reporters, sometimes less time. Every serious newsroom has a website, and me and Angelos, who are very familiar with the Greek reality, you always have to answer a phone call every 5 or 10 minutes by your editor-in-chief, like, Vasily, I read in blah blah blah.gr that Zaev kicked Dimitrov in the face. And I said, okay, you know that I don't have to look for it. Yes, but you do. So you have a lot of pressure coming on you. And sometimes, and I have an example here, there is it's from an article I wrote recently about that issue. We have Trans-Balkan fake news. So I won't mention the media because I don't know if someone works there. So it's, okay. On February 20th, we have a series of Greek media, mostly online, sharing what seems to be an interview of Kodzias. It was an interview of Kodzias. It went viral everywhere, but it was given a month ago. So it was it was not fake news, but it was old news. There was a similar situation also with an alleged statement of the president of Turkey on February 5th. That was on February 5th. So it started from a web page in Skopje. Afterwards, it was uploaded on every Greek main website, and also afterwards in Bulgaria. Every Bulgarians reported on that. That was a statement of Erdogan about we support you against the Greeks that was made in 2013. So it was 5 years ago. One would say that this is clear-cut propaganda, but it really isn't that. It's the Google Translate thing. Unfortunately, with Turkey, we had worse than that. A year ago, a website reported that a Turkish helicopter crashed on the disputed islet, and it proved that Google Translate translated low flight in Turkish as crash. So it went viral for an hour or so, and according to most of the internationally recognized, at least, researchers on that area, that usually people that read some disinformation, let's say, online, if 10 people read it, even if it's demented or proven wrong after a little while, 3 out of 10 remain with the idea that, with the opinion that this thing actually happened. So, of course, this is influencing deeply the core of our democratic institutions, because people are heading to the polls having in mind things that never happened. Unfortunately, the language of the gap of language between the two countries, I mean, Macedonia and Greece, is not going to change simply because Greeks are not going to learn the language. It's not useful for them. I mean, imagine that even Turkey, which is the biggest problem for geopolitical problem for Greece, we are struggling to find some credible colleague to report from Turkey. It's not there, and because of the low budgets, it will become even more difficult in the near future. Now, one good example we can take from is from the countries of the northeast of Europe, Poland and the Baltics. They have been working on Russian malign influence through fake news and disinformation heavily, and they have fact-checking institutions, even though I'm inclined to say that fact-checking is nothing more than reporting, doing your job correctly. Journalists can do it, so fact-checking is like a postmodern word for reporting. But there are things there that we can copy. One good example is how, I know that because I've been there a couple of times in Lithuania, they use historians to teach media literacy, not communications experts or media people, because historians can read sources, can understand what sources are true and what sources are fake, and somehow start to mold students into understanding on why it is important to have the correct information. I could speak for a year or so, Ileana.